Hello and welcome to GMI Guitar Music Institute podcast episode 3. Today I've got a very special guest. His name is Nigel Clark, a virtuoso guitarist from Scotland who now lives in Ireland. I'm going to be interviewing Nigel throughout this podcast. He's going to be giving us some insights into the life of a musician, how he actually makes a living as a musician, as a performer, and only as a performer, which is, although not a unique thing, but it's pretty much a small percentage of musicians can actually say that. If you're listening to this podcast on channels such as iTunes, I'd encourage you to check out the GMI Guitar Music Institute website, as it includes additional material that backs up this episode. You can find us at www.guitarandmusicinstitute.com. Nigel, welcome.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. So now there may be a little bit of confusion because am I right in saying that there is another guitar player called Nigel Clark from the rock world?
Yes, there is, and our Google pages are inextricably linked apparently, and all sort of messed up. So he gets credit for stuff that I've done, and I get credit for stuff that he's done. But he's a different character altogether. He's a singer-songwriter, and he's written some good songs, had a couple of hits a few years back. But he's not me. I'm the jazz guy. He sings, I don't.
That'd be pretty good. You can pick up a lot of his fans once they get older.
Yeah, it's quite funny, yeah. He probably hates me as much as I hate him.
So, but you talk about jazz, but your career, which has spanned, well, quite a while.
Yes.
It hasn't always been, you may always have been into jazz, but it wasn't always jazz. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely right, yeah. I got the chance to go to London when I was 18 and join a friend of mine who had just signed a record deal, and I ended up being a minor session player at the time, but I learned so much from the older guys who were doing regular sessions in London. And I got to play with people like Pick Withers, who was the original drummer with Dire Straits, and Pete Wingfield was on the first session I ever did, and he went on to produce records. In fact, I think he still does in London at the moment. He was a fantastic keyboard player. So you can't help but learn from those guys. And I made a couple of horrendous mistakes, as you do when you're new to the business, and they soon put me right on it, and I was embarrassed enough, having made the mistake, to never want to go down that route of humiliation ever again.
What can you divulge to the audience what the mistake or mistakes were?
Well, the one in particular that I remember was I was asked, because I was working with this guy who was a singer-songwriter, and we used to rehearse a lot. So I knew his music inside out, and I was, as an offshoot of having done that, I got asked to do another session, and I didn't know the material very well, and I was asked to do some fills on a chord sequence that I didn't know, and of course, as a session player, you're supposed to just go straight in there and play, and so I made a complete mess of the fills that they wanted me to do. And I just remember the awful words of the producer on the talkback. He pressed the talkback button. He said, yes, we'll use some of that. And I knew that meant that was like, sorry, next. So I swore to myself after that every time I came across any piece of music that I would learn not only my own part, but I would learn how to improvise and play on any part of the piece of music. So
and
I still have that in the back of my head now. And
has that decision shown itself to be good advice in a sense?
Absolutely, yes, because it means that you have to master especially the harmony part of tunes, because it's one of the things that makes music interesting, is that there's so much. There's infinite possibilities as far as harmonic structures, if you like, are concerned. So to be able to recognize the patterns within that and know where you are and know where it's going, and to be able to, deal with that in a sort of compositional and improvising kind of way. It's one of the crucial tools of certainly a working studio session player.
So you saying that your session career maybe wasn't that auspicious, but you did then go on to work with a band that certainly in the UK had quite some considerable success.
Yes, I worked with a band called Hue Cry that had several top 10 hits in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was with them for about 4 years. And I they were very open to me contributing to their arrangement ideas.
So for maybe young guitarists listening in to this episode, when you say contribute, how does that work? Do you get paid for contributing the work, or do you get points on the album? How does it work? Do you just contribute and that's the end of it and they get all the glory, or how does it work? Could you maybe explain?
Well, yeah, they do get all the glory, or they did get all the glory as far as that was concerned, but I did get paid. I got paid as a session guitarist, and I also got paid as an arranger for the work that I did. I sometimes got paid in terms of they gave me gear instead of money. We came to an arrangement. And on the first album, I got royalty points as well. Okay,
and just briefly, can you is royalty points? That's where you're given a certain number of points on the complete royalties that are coming for an album. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And is that a negotiable thing if people find themselves in that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most things in life are negotiable if you're in a good position to bargain for what you think you're worth. I at the time just kind of went along with what I was offered, so it hasn't amounted to very much, because the cost in those days of making an album was huge. So all of that had to be paid back before anybody would have got paid. But I'm supposed to get paid before anybody else. But I don't think the albums actually ended up recouping its
so I think
costs.
I think a lot of people will be interested in this, especially perhaps older listeners, because they'll remember Hue and Cry, especially if they come from the side of the pond.
Yeah.
So how did you find that time? Did you feel as a musician that you're on a trajectory, an upward trajectory? Did you find the large crowds that were playing to satisfying? And was the music itself, fun to play? And just describe a little about all of that.
Well, it was a very, very, very good live band. At one point, there was an 11-piece band with horns and extra keyboards and percussion and all that kind of stuff. And musically speaking, it was very interesting, and the fact that they were open to contributions from me and from other people, but mostly from me actually. I suppose I was the kind of third man. It was a duo of songwriters, and I used to throw in quite a few ideas as well. But it was a style that I very much related to, and it was music their music was derived from styles of music that I really enjoy, which would be funk and jazz and music with a bit of substance to it. So it was, and we had some really good players in the band too. So it was a lot of fun. The audiences were great. I mean, in the sort of early days, there was a lot of teenage girls at the gigs, which was great to play to. And we played some huge venues. We supported Madonna at Wembley Stadium for 3 nights, and there was 70,000 people at each one of those.
Can I interject here? When you were playing these gigs, did you feel this was the beginning of, maybe not even with Hue and Cry, but continued success in those bands, or even at this stage were you thinking about playing as a jazz guitarist? I mean, what was your thinking?
Yeah, well, I always sort of flip-flopped between my love of rock and pop music and my love of jazz music, and it was quite a difficult path to kind of go along because obviously the audience for jazz is just so small, and then on the other hand, the audience is completely other way for pop music, and it's very difficult to be seen as both of those things. People want you to be a jazz player or a rock player, which is something that I've always struggled with and fought against, because I mean, to me, music is music, and there shouldn't be. I think the boundaries between styles are actually artificial, and they've been developed over the years by marketing people. I mean, in a way that needed to be done because you have to target your audience and sell to them. So it's inevitable in a way that there are these pigeonholes, but for anybody who's got the broad taste that I do in music, it's a real struggle to have to try and fit with those things. So at one point, after I left Hue Cry, I made the conscious decision that I was going to be a jazz player.
So just I took you off track there as usual. When you were in Hue Cry, playing to large audiences, you're back in Madonna and all the rest of it, were your thoughts that you were going to get more work in other bands like this? Was that your hope and desire, or? Yes,
it was, and that did happen because I had a higher profile, having worked with a successful rock band. I was phoned or contacted by other people who liked my playing or thought that I might be able to make a contribution to their recordings or their live shows. So I did. I worked with the Clannad singer Moya Brennan, who is, well, at that time, I mean, Clannad was one of the biggest bands in the world. So I got to work with her. I worked with Gloria Gaynor.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a huge star and a wonderful person, actually. I really enjoyed working with her.
Did you keep in contact with her through the years, or is it one of these things where you do the work and then you go your separate ways?
Yeah, pretty much. I did the work, and she did. She asked me to contact her manager and put a quote in because I put together the band as well for that engagement with her.
That must have been. Was that a tricky thing to do? To make up a quote? You don't want to go in too low, but you don't want to go in too high.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I just had to pluck figures out of the air. And
this is a really interesting part of the interview. I don't think many people, I certainly didn't know this, that someone like Gloria Gaynor would approach someone and then through their manager they would have to ask someone to put a band together and then give a quote. It's almost like corporate music in a sense, putting a gig together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, musicians have to be paid, so and the thing that made it attractive for her was that we were all in Europe, and if she was going to be touring in Europe, she wouldn't have to pay the expenses of bringing an American band over, and she was happy, she was delighted with the band that I put together, and because I got in fact they were all Scottish. Or living in Scotland at least, and it was great that she responded as well as she did to the way that we played her music. So it was inevitable that you do have to discuss money, and so I plucked figures out of the air. I didn't make it too cheap, which I think is always a danger, because people do need to make a living. So yeah, I mean that was an interesting experience altogether.
So from there, you then started on the lonely path of jazz. Would that be right?
Yes. It was never that lonely, really. And the thing is that because of my attitude altogether, I never actually really only played jazz, and I still don't only play jazz, because that's another narrow pigeonhole. And jazz historically was never a narrow music at all. It was always looking outward and pulling in influences from other styles, which all the great music and all the great musicians have always done. They never you never get a purist great composer or a purist great soloist in the jazz idiom or any other idiom. The great musicians are always the ones who are looking out at all the different styles and grabbing stuff that they like and putting it into their music. And I'm including people like Mozart, who was into Turkish music, and Bach, who was into the Italian style at the time. And right all the way down the line, Stravinsky and Bartók and those kind of guys dipping into the folk traditions of their own countries and other countries. And in the 20th century as well, all the great classical composers and pop composers were always grabbing something from somebody else's territory. And that's what gives flavour to the music and makes it great.
Yeah, in a sense, there are a lot of people who pigeonhole themselves, and as you say, music is music. Why not enjoy all of it? And there is this whole movement, isn't there, towards, creativity or creating new things. The marketing men always say are always telling us there's someone with the latest sound, but the reality is everybody's basically stealing from everyone else and merging it all. It's all a melange.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's healthy. That's the way it should be. The danger is if you focus only on one thing, and then you get some very barren music, which I have to say there's too much of at the moment. And I think that the internet spreads a lot of that. It's almost cult type music, and I'm including things like gypsy jazz, which stems from the music of Django Reinhardt, who was one of these great musicians who came from his own tradition, the gypsy tradition, but he was fanatical about American jazz, which was alien music to him at the time. And he was a huge fan of, as you know, of Louis Armstrong. So he started to try to play that, but bringing in his own personality. And the combination, miraculously as it happens, turned into something completely different. It wasn't American jazz, and it wasn't traditional gypsy music. It was Django Reinhardt's music.
So would you say, Nigel, that Django was probably, in terms of guitar, the most important influence on your playing, or would that be fair to say?
He certainly would be one of the very big influences on the way that I play. I remember the first time I heard Django Reinhardt, I was 14 or 15 years old, and I'd only been I'd only started playing a few months, and I wanted to play rock music, and I was trying to do that as best I could, and listening to bands like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, and I was practicing with a little guy that lived up the road as well, who just started playing the guitar, and his dad came in one day and he said, "Listen, guys, forget about all that rock music, blues stuff that you're doing. It's fine, but have a listen to this guy." And he put on I think it was an old 78 RPM record.
Some people may not know what that is, but it's basically, it was the revolutions, and am I right in thinking the smaller the record, the faster it went?
Something like that. It was the way the vinyl records spin, the speed that they spin round. Anyway, it was a very, very old record, and he put this on, and it was Django Reinhardt.
Was it an original?
I don't think so.
No?
It might have been. I don't know. Yeah,
was it crackly?
Yeah, it was very crackly. Yeah.
Probably. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, he put this on, and I was completely mesmerised by it, because I knew that it was. I could tell instinctively that what Django was doing was improvised, but it sounded more like Mozart or Bach to me than Ritchie Blackmore or who's the Black Sabbath guy? Tony Iommi.
Yeah. Who also has a couple of problems in having fingers.
Yes, that's a good story actually. About his he damaged his hand in the same way that Django had damaged fingers. Yeah. And in fact, he was inspired to carry on playing by somebody playing him a Django Reinhardt record. So
incredible connections, isn't it?
So, I mean, and the thing is, once the sound of Django was in my ears, I couldn't get it out. I had to go back and keep checking it out. But I couldn't get to grips with the speed of thought that it was apparent for him to be able to improvise at the tempos and with the harmony, the chords changing as fast as they do. And I thought, this is just impossible. And it was a couple of years before I actually really got to grips with it and worked out that actually it is possible. And there are techniques that you can apply to do it. That doesn't mean that you're ever going to be able to play with the musicality of Django Reinhardt, because even now the great Django Reinhardt style players like Stochelo Rosenberg and Birelli Lagren, when you listen to them, they're fantastic players, but they are not Django Reinhardt. They just don't have that genius.
Well, I've got to be honest here, and I hopefully not offend anyone that's listening, but my heart kind of sinks when you go on YouTube and you see film from these, there's competitions where everybody tries to play like Django Reinhardt, and I just wonder how Django would feel about that, because surely we should be trying to be individuals in our music, and there's just something kind of like pouring aspic over the whole thing and keeping it as it is, and therefore almost helping to, only anoraks would then like it. It leads to a dead end.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a dead end, and Django,
Do you think we're going to be on a hit list for saying this?
Probably, yeah. But I'm positive that Django would laugh his socks off if he was to come back and hear what's going on and the legacy. I mean, his ego would explode, and I mean, he had a huge ego anyway, which is totally justified. But he would scream with laughter, I'm sure, if he heard what everybody is trying to do. And the thing is, what the gypsy jazz guitarists have chosen a very, very narrow part of Django's history to try to copy, because as soon as Django got his hands on a better guitar than those Machiavelli style guitars, he was playing electric guitar, and he didn't want to play the style that he developed with Stefan Grappelli. He wasn't interested in that anymore. He was playing bebop. He was listening to Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and those kind of guys. And he was trying to play their type of jazz. So
are you saying, Nigel, that the people that take that small section, or it's a large section, but a part of Django's life, do you think they find comfort in that? They're almost like Brexiteers, England of 1950, jumpers for goalposts, steam trains.
Yeah.
Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't
Looking
know.
back to a time where everything was better, maybe?
Maybe it is. I don't know. I really don't know what it is. The world is changing in strange directions at the moment as we speak. But I don't know. Maybe there's always been the sort of the fanatic, which is where the word fan comes from. So the fans of Django Reinhardt, and that part, I love that acoustic 1930s sound. It's probably my favourite style of Django Reinhardt's. But the problem is that was it in the 1930s. That was when it was great. It's never going to be great almost 100 years later. It's impossible. And if people are instead...
Should we cut them some slack, Nigel? Should we thank them for keeping the tradition alive?
No, because they're not keeping... I think they're not keeping the tradition alive in a healthy way. To come back to an earlier point that I made, the way that music develops and the way that music becomes rich and wonderful and timeless is by looking outward and broadening perspectives, not narrowing them down, not distilling them, not reworking them, not refining them endlessly. That isn't the way the great music happens.
Okay, well, assuming that we're still around, having not been put on some hit list,
yes,
and rightly assassinated for saying such things, let's move on now to just helping the listeners understand, many of whom will probably be guitarists, and maybe many of them will be starting out in their careers. as I think I said earlier, you're part of a very small percentage of people who almost exclusively make their income just from performance. I don't know if you ever think about that, but the reality is, most musicians do have to do other things like teach to make ends meet. What sort of life is it as a musician who just earns his living from performance?
Well, it's not. I mean, it's great. I count myself very, very lucky to be in the position that that I can actually make a living from concerts. Is what I do. It's a lot of touring, which I've always enjoyed, and you have to be good at traveling. You have to enjoy still going through the security at the airports and that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is something that I brought up in an earlier podcast, episode 2, and it's about dreams versus reality. Is there a difference between the dream of being a performer for you and the reality of being a performer?
Not really. I mean, I suppose in a way I'm living the dream, as they say. I'm very, very lucky that I get enough work touring, working with the projects that I'm involved with at the moment. You have to be able to diversify and work with more than one project because it's difficult to get, to be touring. Like in the old days, they would be doing 200 nights out of the year with the same band and sitting on a tour bus and all traveling together and getting very annoyed with each other as well, of course, because you get to know people far too well. But so those days are certainly gone. The venues are not really there so much, but it is still possible. I mean, and I'm doing it. And if you're involved in really high quality projects, and you have to have somebody who's willing to get on the phone, a manager or somebody in the band has to have the ability to get on the phone and on the emails and do that marketing for the band. I don't think that doing everything online is still going to get you to where the position where you're actually a touring musician.
It is interesting, that point, because there are some musicians on YouTube, they've got massive followings, but I don't know that there's the emotional attachment that there is from actually seeing someone live.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. That we live in curious times as well, as far as live performances are concerned. They're not the same as they used to be. When I started out, when I started, there were so many venues, mostly sort of pub type venues, or places that had a specific music room above a pub, something like that, and smaller venues where bands would be just playing all the time. They would have residencies in there, or they would be touring around the country and playing. And there was like a real circuit for people. There was a huge appetite for live music, and all the bands were writing their own songs. It was all original music, and people were all trying to be better than the other bands who were on the circuit as well. So that competition was very, very healthy, because the judges in the competition, so to speak, were the audiences. If you didn't get audiences coming in, then you knew you were doing something wrong, and you had to change your repertoire, or throw the guitar player out, or get a better drummer, which happens. It sounds ruthless, but I mean those problems, if there were problems with your music, became very apparent because you just wouldn't be asked to play in places anymore. So that sort of thing is not happening anymore. People are learning from in colleges where they're getting a lot of false praise, I would have to say, because they're getting encouragement when they're actually they need criticism.
I remember once, actually, if I can interject, when you and I were with a group in Northern Ireland, and we went to a school, and we walked into a classroom, and I just remember your reaction, because there was like workstations of keyboards everywhere, and you just shook your head and said, "This is not rock and roll."
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly not rock and roll. I mean, yeah, that's another very good point, is that in the days when rock music was invented, the last place that you would ever be learning would be in a school. You'd be leaving school early or not going at all in order to practice and play with your bands. And if you got the approval of your teachers, you knew that you were doing something badly wrong.
I know we're going a little off beam here, but why do you think that whole hothouse of competitiveness and almost natural selection in terms of music is gone? Is it the record company's fault? Is it the internet's fault? I mean, I remember as a 15-year-old seeing the great Irish guitarist Louis Stewart on BBC Two. You will never see that again now. What has happened, Nigel? What do you feel?
Well, I think, we might be going down some controversial routes here.
I'm sure people will enjoy that.
I think that the problem is state-sponsored education.
Okay.
And it's an unnatural, well, not unnatural, but it's an artificial way of bringing people to their dreams. It comes back to...
You alluded to this earlier, didn't you, about people getting praised when they should be criticised. Do you believe in survival of the fittest?
Well, not exactly like that, but what the type, again, my assessment of how the great musicians all got to the point where they were able to do what they have done. What they did was they learned their craft to a certain point where they became self-sufficient and confident in what they could do. And then they embarked on a journey of discovery.
As indeed we are always told we are on now, a journey.
Yes, but these guys were
really on a journey.
Yeah, but the great musicians were exploring constantly. They had their skills, they had their techniques, and they were confident that they could do something, but they were always looking to explore. They weren't constantly going back for more lessons, going back for more tuition to try and refine their craft all the time. That was a given. There's a certain point where you just have to be an artist and say, okay, this is me, this is what I'm going to do, and everything that I am going to express is filtered through my own consciousness, if you like, and you don't represent to the public the likes from your various teachers and tutors. It's fine for people to influence you like that, but everything that you have, you have grabbed yourself, and you know the reasons exactly why you like this aspect of music rather than that aspect of music. You haven't been shown that necessarily. You've discovered it, you found it, you find these things, and all those things are mine, and now I'm going to give them back to the world. For example, I mean, I'm speaking in a very abstract way here, but for example, to go back to jazz, the two great piano players, Bill Evans and Oscar Peterson. Bill Evans has been quoted as saying that he thought he was playing like Oscar Peterson, and that's what he wanted to do. But the other music that he had crammed into his mind didn't allow him to just be a clone of Oscar Peterson. He aspired to that fantastic technique, and he did have his own wonderful technique, but the sound and the choices of harmony and the note choices were entirely personal to Bill Evans, and he didn't sound, I mean, you listen to them, they couldn't be more striking in the difference between the two of them.
It's interesting because with a student at university, he's looking at a Belevin's piece just now, and it's very much imbued with a sense of classical music within it.
Exactly, and that brings me back to my other points. These guys are always looking to grab something from somebody else's music to make it interesting.
Knowing you as I do, Nigel, you were completely self-taught.
Yeah.
Do you feel that has both coloured your outlook on education to the masses in this non-organic way? And do you feel that self-tuition aspect has made you almost... No, I was going to use the word peculiar, but that would be unfair. Special musician that you are.
I quite like peculiar.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, obviously, because I taught myself, I would recommend that's what people should do.
Is there any place in your mind for structured learning?
Yes, there is, because you need to get some techniques together, and obviously there are. You need information. You need to know. You need to know how to place your fingers on the instrument. So that sort of thing. But there's too much education now happening,
or maybe not enough people learning on the job.
Well, yes, but all constantly going to tuition and going to lessons is not a healthy thing. That you need to stand on your own 2 feet at a certain point, and I mean that. Again, referring to some of the great musicians, they've all done that to a certain point. I mean, Bach's older brother was a student of Pachelbel, who wrote the famous Pachelbel's canon. And and there's a story about how Bach, at the age of, he was a teenager at the time, stole a manuscript that his brother was borrowed it. He didn't steal it.
Yeah.
But he sneaked into his brother's room at night and his brother had been studying this piece of music that Pachelbel was giving him tuition on. And Bach went in and he memorized it all, and his brother was very angry with him. I think he gave him a whack for daring to do that. But that's the kind of attitude that I really like, where you have such a passion that you'll find your own pieces of information, and then you'll know that they are yours. The thing I find quite dangerous as well is that the danger is that you become a combination of your teacher's likes rather than your own likes, and you'll never have that personal connection with something like a chord sequence or a way of playing a line that you've found yourself, and you understand exactly the reasons why you play that. It's not somebody has not said to you it's okay to do that. If you play a kind of unusual type of line, it's okay to play that unusual type of line. Well, but it's not unless you've actually experienced it firsthand yourself. If you find that out, then it becomes a different tool. Yeah,
you actually know it for yourself. Yeah, self-discovery. On a personal level, I know all the things that have meant the most to me or seared into my consciousness are the things that I've discovered for myself.
Exactly, yeah.
Which brings us on to the internet. I'm almost don't want to ask you this question, but I would, before I ask you it, I'll prefix it with... it seems to me that a lot of young people are just cherry picking nowadays on the internet. They take a little bit from this, a little bit of that. That actually the amount of time people are watching videos is under 5 minutes. What's your feeling about online websites that, or not websites, videos that supposedly teach people things? I take it from what you've said, you would not be too favourable to that.
Well, I think part of the problem is that there's so much on there, and it's like, how do you find the one that is right for you? I don't really know how that goes.
What's your feeling about the whole internet aspect? Does it actually offer the professional musician anything, or is it just all nonsense?
No, it's not all nonsense. It's actually a really great reference point. It's having having a library that you can instantly get into, and that is fantastic. And I've used it myself, and I do continue to use it myself if I have to. If somebody asks me for a song or something that I don't know, that you can find it, and you can find different versions of it there. And it's really, as far as that goes, it's a continuing part of my own education, by which I mean my self-education. So I think that's really great. I remember the first time I discovered YouTube, and it was not very well known at the time. I just happened to be looking for a video of something, and it came up, and it was on this YouTube channel. And mostly the YouTube clips were people taking films of their dogs running around a park and that sort of thing. But everything is now on there, and that is an amazing resource. And I think that for me, certainly, those clips of, like, for example, if I wanted to see Django Reinhardt playing, there is a couple of clips where he's actually there, and
full biographies.
Yeah, exactly, and you can get something from all of that. But the actual tuition videos, I'm not sure about. I mean, if there's a specific piece of information that'll make things just really click into place for somebody, I'm sure it's there. But the problem will be finding the right one for you.
Yeah, and knowing what is actually good and bad advice. But I take from what you've said over the last 15, 20 minutes, really what saddens you is the lack of self-discovery.
Yeah, the lack of people having that mentality where they really want to go and find something new and find their own personality. Well, I remember when I started out, I used to read the interviews from all the great guitar players, and I've been lucky to have actually played with some of my heroes as well. I mean, Jan Akkerman, the great Dutch guitar player, was a huge influence on me at the time. And I was doing a showcase in France one time, and he was there, and he asked me to come and play with his band, which was a massive compliment. So I played with him, and also Philip Catherine, the great Belgian guitar player. I played with him as well.
He had his cravat on?
He did actually, yeah. He favours a cravat. But I used to read interviews with those guys when I was a youngster, and they always said, you have to find your own personality. Don't copy what other people are doing. And that for me has really stayed in my head. And I think that's the best advice, really. People, the world needs different personalities and different music. So
we were talking, and of course, you and me talking away, we always go on tangents.
Yeah.
We were talking about making a living. You're on a tour. Is it a tour of Scotland, or is it the UK you're playing?
Well, it's a bit of both actually, but it's tour of Scotland this week, and then
Where were you playing?
We're playing Glasgow and Edinburgh as the two main concerts. So the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh and the Cottiers Theatre, which is a great space to play in Glasgow. And then we were up in Inverness, and tonight we're going up to the famous Hospital Field House up on the East Coast. So, which is one of our favourite venues to play. It's Arbroath.
I always get the two mixed up.
Yeah, it's a great venue. So we're going there, and then we go back home tomorrow. But then next week we fly to South Africa to do a couple of concerts there. And then straight back to do quite a few concerts. I think it's 10 days. We're in England and Wales. So we're kind of touring. The way tours seem to work nowadays is you have to kind of go home for a couple of days in between and then come back. But you have to obviously be able to make that work financially for everybody. But that's the way it works, because in the old days you would string the whole thing together, day after day or night after night after night. And that's more difficult to do, especially the early part of the week. Venues are not really interested in they can't get audiences Monday, Tuesday, and sometimes Wednesday.
Too much on telly, or people sitting at home with their phones.
So,
and why not? So you did mention that there. You have moved to Ireland, and you've been there for a couple of years now.
A couple of years.
How's the music scene over there? Would you say it's better than in Scotland, or?
No, I wouldn't say it was better. I mean, it's certainly as healthy. There's a lot of fantastic guitar players in Ireland, which is great to see. The traditional music scene there has always been huge, and still as great as it's always been. The jazz scene is big there too.
Do you get many gigs in Ireland?
I've not actually been really looking for an awful lot of gigs in Ireland, I have to say, although I'm living there. But I did a recording recently with Hugh Buckley, the famous Irish guitar player, jazz player. And we did a duets album, which turned out really, really well. So we're expecting to do a lot more gigs next year with that. And I've just finished finished working on a debut album with an amazing singer, Colette Cassidy, who, as it turns out, she is a jazz singer, and it turns out she's an amazing lyric writer and songwriter altogether. So we've got a debut album with 12 original songs that blend together the Irish ballad style and the American songbook style as well. So
that sounds really exciting.
It's a good combination. She's got an incredible voice too.
So to sum up what we've been rambling on about,
yes, lots of rambling.
Would it be a fair representation to say, as someone who makes his living from playing music exclusively, that A, follow your dreams, and B, stay away from state-sponsored education?
Well, I'm too late for state-sponsored education, thankfully. But yes, I mean, I think take it with a pinch of salt and don't see it as an end in itself. I think that's the danger. And get your tools together, get your sound together, get your unique personality together, and then try some things. Something else I do have to say is the world is changing very rapidly at the moment, and nobody knows exactly where things are going. Things have politically and geographically or geopolitically have been drastically kind of upset from the ways that we've been thinking about them recently. And at times like this is when art and music steps into the void, so to speak, and it's a great opportunity now to actually express something new, because civilizations, when they're all done and dusted in 1,000 years from now, what will be remembered is the art and music and the arts in general. That is what people will see as representing our civilization and what it was worth.
Well, there you have it, folks. Sage words indeed from Nigel Clark. And I just have to say that I'm a great admirer of Nigel's work. If you haven't heard Nigel and he's playing, there's some clips below. I would urge you to go and purchase some just to help him out, and you'll help GMI out as well. But all joking aside, Nigel Clark is, without doubt, one of the great players, jazz players and guitarists that Scotland has ever produced, and is an international star that actually deserves a much bigger audience than what he has. That's not to say that he doesn't have an audience. He does, but he deserves a bigger one.
Thanks, Jed.
So, it's been fantastic having you here, Nigel.
Been a pleasure.
Thanks for spending this time with us, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are going to be really interested in what you have to say. If you're not listening to this on the Guitar Music Institute, get on over there. I'm going to put up some videos of Nigel playing, including, I think there's one up of Nigel playing with Gloria, Gaynor, and with Hue Cry, but obviously his works with Koshka and the Tim Cliphouse trio, who Nigel is currently working with. All incredible music. And we will see you on the next one, or won't see you. Hopefully you will hear us on the next podcast, which will be be coming real soon and is penciled in to be another interview, so with another fantastic guitar player. So from me, Jed Brocky, and from you, Nigel Clark, goodbye.
Goodbye.